Good afternoon, everybody. Day three of Advocacy Bootcamp. Thank you all for being here. As Heidi said, if you're new or returning, I see some familiar faces from the last 2 days. Thank you all for committing to this. I know it's a bit of a crash course, but we hope that it has been informative and gives you a little bit of runway if you want to dive deeper between now and when the legislative session in South Carolina at least, starts up in January, that you've got some time to kind of think through everything that we've talked about here the last few days. Today, we're going to be talking about Together SC's guiding principles on advocacy. I'll get to what all that is, but as Heidi mentioned, this is about your organization. Our goal here is to help you think about how you can ingrain advocacy into your DNA at a pace that is good for you and your organization, and what sort of the guiding principles are that we like to highlight for nonprofits to align with if you're going to do this work. Kind of keeps you in line with best practices, with some legal stuff, just some good principles to keep in mind. First up, of course, in the chat, if you want to introduce yourself so folks know where everybody's from, that would be great. And we can also say, hey, if you have questions throughout this, please put them in the chat. Heidi and myself are going to monitor the chat and pull questions out in real time. If they tie directly to what we're talking about, or if not, we'll get to them at the end, of course, as well. And Heidi also mentioned join the Advocacy Allies peer network. Whether you're just advocacy curious or an advocacy pro, it's just a great way to connect with folks who are doing this work. And as we've talked about a lot through the last 2 days, picking something and following it, this is a good way to do that because you get to meet your folks that are doing this work and you can follow them and see how they do this work. So I'm excited about today for a couple of reasons. The guiding principles is a publication that Together SC has put together over a number of years now. We just released this year in 2026 our fifth edition. I'm not going to read all this to you. You obviously get a copy of the slides if you want, but this is directly from our guiding principles, and I'll have a link to download this at the end as well that you can QR code and the hyperlink. But this is our guiding principles document is meant to meet the needs of all nonprofits of any size. So whether you're a volunteer organization with $20,000 a year or less, or you've got a budget of 5 million or more, all of these principles help in this document help you align with best practices, help you continue to operate effectively and efficiently. And they're sometimes they're check boxes, but sometimes they're journeys, and they never end. You're always getting to improve and fine tune that work in your mission. So. This is a reference to navigate the board and staff responsibilities and accountabilities, whether you're just starting out or established. This is not a mandatory thing. This is not a legal document. We're not a regulatory agency, but this is sort of our sort of a good industry baseline, a way if you that we see highly effective nonprofits operating. And this is a really good guide for that. So if you're smaller, you may not have the same capacity on some of these in the full document. We understand that. But again, this is sort of a North Star as we're always trying to improve and get better and get better. So um, we have a number of chapters in this book. Sorry, I call it a book because it's a great workbook as well. It's not just a list of words. It's a workbook you can go through each with your team, with your board, and write about where you are in the process and keep fine tuning things. But we have a new chapter for 2026, which is why today is sort of a special day. We are highlighting this chapter of our guiding principles document, which is the advocacy and policy. It's brand new for this year. In the last edition, this was not in there. Over that period of time, as we've discussed, we've seen nonprofits do a lot more advocacy work because politics have either drifted into their mission and they're being required to do so, or they have a deeper interest in advocacy. So we're going to just focus on the advocacy and policy chapter, but know that these are the other chapters in there. There are 10 total, everything from governance to operations and evaluations and metrics, some really good material in there. All of this was written by professionals in the field, Together SC members who are consultants. This one, Advocacy and Policy, was written in-house by our team here at Together SC, by yours truly, but also reviewed by our team. And so this is rooted in South Carolina knowledge and best practice. So we hope that this is a useful tool for you. And we're going to jump in to this. And again, please ask questions in the chat, and Heidi knows to just yell at me to answer them in real time,
Yes.
and we'll get going. All right, here we go. There we go. So all of our guiding principles are structured this way, but advocacy and public policy has one guiding principle. All of them are guided by one guiding principle. And then there are a number of core elements under each guiding principle. Advocacy, there are five. And underneath those five in total for advocacy and policy, there are 18 recommended practices. And so don't get overwhelmed. It's not hard to follow. It's pretty easy, and it's a good sort of thought experiment to run through all of these. But we're going to dive into each of these, and I'll talk about them. And if you have questions, like I said, feel free to put it in the chat. The guiding principle itself for this chapter is that nonprofits participate in public discourse on the issues that impact their mission at all levels of government, as permitted under federal law, with nonpartisan intentions and practices. I'm going to talk about each of these green areas, but this is the guiding principle that this is that North Star that all nonprofits in South Carolina participate in this type of public discourse for issues that matter to them. And so I'm going to highlight a few of these on purpose because these words were chosen with intentionality. Nonprofits participate in public discourse. We want you to understand that you're allowed to participate in these public processes. We talked about that on day one, that you're allowed to advocate 100% of the time. You are allowed to lobby, not 100% of the time necessarily, but you are allowed to do some lobbying. So understanding that nonprofits, you can participate in this. So that is not a barrier of entry, is the ability to participate. But it's also not just about, you know, at the state house and bills and the budget, but it's also public hearings, public meetings, comment periods. We've had a number of emails that we've sent out in our public policy updates this year on giving public comments to proposed rules at the federal government level. All of these are participating in the public discourse of issues. So you have that ability. So understand that you can do that. On the issues that impact their mission at all levels of government. On the issues that impact their mission, that's really important, and we'll get into some of the core elements and practices speak to this directly. But it's important that we believe that the organization knows when to take action, not just because everyone else is doing it, but because it impacts your mission. And that because once you are able to fine tune that, it helps you focus your efforts on things that move the needle that you can tie directly to your mission, and to those you serve, to your donors, board members, staff, volunteers, everybody. So understanding how to approach issues that impact your mission is really important. It also then helps all of us work together to understand who's going to lead on something and how do we support them, or is it us that we're going to have to lead on something, and how others can support us as permitted under federal law. There are laws surrounding this work. We talked about a few of them over the last 2 days. So it's important to understand them. As it is with HR and finance, it's important to understand the legal parameters so that you can navigate this. That's a fairly self-explanatory, but it's always important to remember that this does have some guardrails on it. And with nonpartisan intentions and practices. So not only is nonpartisanship of 501(c)(3)s required under federal law, but it's also, we believe, a best practice, even if that law did not exist. Your mission exists regardless of who holds office. You still have that family to serve in front of you. You still have your community to serve in front of you day in and day out. And it's important to keep in mind that that work needs to continue regardless of who holds an office. At the federal level, with the federal law, you are not allowed to participate in partisan activities, meaning specifically around elections. So as we've talked about, not showing up to election events wearing your organization's name badge, not endorsing candidates. That sort of activity is prohibited under federal law, which we believe to be a good thing. It's a best practice, even though if you follow some of our policy updates, there have been recent threats to that. But we believe this is actually a protection on us that helps us build that trust with our community, because regardless of who our neighbors elect, they can still rely on us for services, as well as keeps us, I think, true to our missions. So that's the guiding principle. Um, and sorry, how did you have something or? Did I?
No, well, I
Okay.
was going to pose a question
No, please
that I'm
do.
putting,
This is a great spot.
yeah, I'm putting it in the chat. Which of these has your organization participated in most often? Contacting legislators, public meeting hearings, public comment opportunities, community coalitions, or we haven't participated yet? Go ahead and answer in the chat. Woo! Adrian, 1 through 4. Public meetings and hearings. A lot of these things, it's that just right, GP, that the first time is a little nerve-wracking because you've never done it. But then once you have that experience, it just comes so much easier. One through
It really
four.
does. Practice makes perfect. Practice also builds comfort and muscle memory. And it's always a little nerve-wracking doing public testimony just because you're in front of other people. But that's I'll give my plug to my theater friends in the room that did theater like I did. Highly recommend improv and theater to help shake some of that off. But it does, and I think it's really important. Thank you for highlighting everything that y'all have done and talking about that, because you take whatever steps you can take. And I think adhering to this principle of I think in those, whether you're speaking or what have you, understanding this underpinning is really helpful. That when you walk up to that podium, you feel very comfortable and confident that what you're talking about is aligned with your mission, is in line with best practices and all and such.
Yeah.
We're going to dig into some core elements here. So, core element number one under this guiding principle. And again, this is a reflection, a reflective tool. So, if you have a reflection on this, feel free to drop it in the chat as we roll through these. And of course, questions, but even for your peers to see how you've been approaching this work. But these are sort of questions or things to reflect on for your organization. Our organization understands how our work is or can be impacted by policy decisions made at the state, local, and federal level. So you'd ask yourself, well, does our organization understand this? And again, that's a spectrum. You don't have to be an expert on day one, but how are you understanding things? And so how we recommend practices to get to this point include things like receiving regular policy updates from various sources, including trade associations, media outlets, agencies, as well as sources that may not be in alignment with our mission. If you've participated the last 2 days, some of these are going to sound very familiar because all of this ties together. In day one, we talked about how you plug in to be an effective advocate and getting information from various sources. So that's one practice your organization can implement. And maybe that's just to a staff member or to your whole team, and you divide it up because there are a lot of newsletters out there. Know who represents our organization's service area and elected offices at the local, state, and federal levels, and follow their remarks and policy proposals. So, does your organization know who represents them? We talked about that too in day one of who represents you. And does your team understand that? And not just you personally, but where your organization sits or where your organization provides service. And are you following them? Because maybe they'll talk about you. Hopefully it's all good. But they're talking about you or they're talking about the work that you are involved in or your mission area. And so it's really important to know that because that helps you understand how the policy decision may impact you. You can also, does your organization dedicate time at various points of the year to discuss the implications of public policy on our programs and services at the board and staff level? Are you taking time to say, hey guys, we've heard in county council debating affordable housing. Let's talk about what that means for us and how we might approach that work. Again, this is not saying that your recommended practices, do you do advocacy campaigns regularly to impact, your local office? This is for this element. This is how do you build that practice of your organization being aware of how this impacts you so that if you do feel like it's time to take action, it's rooted in this baseline knowledge. There we go. Core element number two. Our organization understands the legal requirements and restrictions related to public policy and public policy education and lobbying. This is fairly self-explanatory. This is the whole legal framework here that we need to make sure that we know. Does our organization distribute trusted resources to our board and staff regarding the legal stipulations around lobbying and advocacy for nonprofits? Are you guys Sharing, if you're going to participate in this work, are you starting with, hey, here's what's allowed, here's what's not allowed, and maybe here's what's allowed for our organization that might be a little bit more restrictive than the law because that's just a decision your organization has made. Whether it's the state mandated policies, federal, or it's your own organization policies, are you distributing those trusted resources to your board and staff on how you're going to do this? Does your organization discuss how current priorities and actions related to public policy may be impacted by the legal framework for nonprofits? So, how are you guys discussing how hey this is going to impact how we participate in this? And so if it's going to change the requirements on us, that's important to know as well. Does your organization look for opportunities under the law to raise our voices on policies that impact our mission? Again, it's not an expectation that you go start rallies at the State House if that's not what you're seeking to do or you're not ready to do that. But it's a good practice to think about, hey, when can we raise our voice? What is appropriate for us and how we raise our voice and have that conversation and write it down and discuss it as a group. So that you, again, as we talked about, the guiding principle is that you participate in the public process. So maybe that's just, hey, for this issue, we've got a public comment period, or the planning commission's about to meet. We're going to give testimony there, but maybe we don't, and we're going to give testimony at city council. That you're looking for opportunities to raise your voice because we do, by the virtue of this chapter being present in our guiding principles, we believed, much like it is in our mission, that advocacy is important for nonprofits to engage in at a level that you are comfortable and confident in, but that this really helps not just helps your organization, but ultimately helps the sector establish itself as experts on these fields and participating in all of these public processes. Core element number three. Our organization has adopted board and staff level policies that provide clarity on when the organization may engage in advocacy action. I'm going to park it here for a little bit because this is a really important one, and it's one that we have gone through ourselves at Together SC. All of these that I've talked about are things that we've done as an organization as well. So we're always happy to share our journey in this and provide you with any sort of insights that may glean. Our
Hey, GP, I
Yeah,
have before you go on any further, I have a quick poll to see how the different participants handle policies and guidelines before you go through it,
perfect.
and then we'll find out. Okay,
Yeah,
so let me launch that poll. Okay. Does your organization have a written policy or framework that guides when and how you engage in advocacy? And go ahead. This is anonymous, so don't worry. Just answer freely. And so we have some that yes, maybe informally. We have several that say no or that they're not sure. But that's why you're here, I imagine. All right, I'm going to close in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And let's go ahead and share those results. All right, GP, what do you think?
great. Thanks y'all for participating in that. This is super helpful, and I think as expected. Actually, if anything, I'm happy to see there was actually more yeses than even if it needs updating than than I, than I expected originally. So that's great to hear. Um, because but I'm here for you if you don't have one. Don't worry. We're here to help. I'm not surprised by that either because that's what we've been finding is as folks have had to participate in advocacy work, the question has become, well, how do I do this? And we've talked a little bit over the last 2 days about the mechanics of that. What does advocacy look like? But again, today is about, well, how do my organization approach this? And while we can't prescribe that for everybody, we have developed a framework that works really well for our organization and has worked well for others. And these core elements and the recommended practices I'll share kind of help, again, not prescribe that to you, hopefully, but help illustrate the questions that we believe really help. But so yes, I am. That is a really good input and feedback. Um, because I'll talk about what we've done after I read these for you. I don't know everyone can read on the screen, but for maybe you're driving and you shouldn't be reading the screen. I will tell you what they say. Some of the recommended practices include you have a clear set of principles adopted by the board that provide direction on what types of policy issues align with our mission. I'm going to dig in on these in a second, so don't worry if it sounds like a lot of words. Does your organization provide a stated framework for staff and board members alike to understand how our organization prioritizes policy issues and what actions can be expected to be taken when advocating? Does the organization empower our staff to make decisions rooted in adopted policy to address public policy issues that as they arise? And then last, do we train our staff on our internal policies? Together SC went through this journey in 2020 and 2021 in particular when we established our public policy agenda and our advocacy framework and a board policy. For Together SC, you are all our members and you all do really great work and you all have if you all do a lot of advocacy work, you're going to have different issues that you work on. And some of you are in housing, some of you are in community development. And so there's a lot of great work being done. And for an association like ours, it's really hard to say no to if someone were to say, "Hey, can you come help us with this big bill to push through," or what have you. It's really easy to say yes because we love y'all. But at the end of the day, we don't necessarily have the full capacity to do that as an organization. And so, as I mentioned, there are the guiding principles of how do we focus on our mission. And we decided to start with that. We started with our mission about helping nonprofits be better at all they do. And so we have developed a set of advocacy principles that have been adopted by our board. It's a set of 5 principles that talk about if a policy issue aligns with one of those, at least one of those, then it is eligible for us to take action on. If it doesn't align with those 5 principles, then we are not going to take action on it. And it's no harm, no foul. But if it is a no, we are able to articulate to that individual or that organization that, hey, we're not going to sign on to that letter, or we're not going to be able to give public comment on it because it just doesn't align with our advocacy principles. But if you want to participate in the peer network at Advocacy Allies and share it with our peers, you're happy to do so. But Together SC's resources may not be allocated towards this. And so we've developed these principles to do the same. And then we thank you for the question in the chat. I'm going to get to that in a second, Bob. I'll come back around to that. That's a really good question. I'll come back to it after this a little bit. And then, so when we say yes to something, though, and ours include things like whole sector impact, meaning it impacts your ability as a nonprofit to operate effectively, democratic and legislative processes. So the ability of nonprofits, not individuals, but the ability for nonprofits to engage in things like voter registration drives or public comment periods and the length of those public comment periods, that type of process. We also have equity and social justice as an advocacy principle. And for that one specifically, it's about making sure that organizations, again, how nonprofits operate, aren't impeded in their ability to do their work in an equitable manner. And then we also have, of course, Together C impacts, things that impact us as an organization. Of course, you're going to stand up for yourself. And lastly, we also have charitable tax status and tax implications because it's a little bit of a niche thing for 501(c)(3). So we pull that out on its own. So we have these principles. And again, when an issue matches it, we say yes. But when we say yes, that doesn't mean we're carrying the banner on it. We're not necessarily the author of every op-ed for everything that we said that meets those principles. We put it on a spectrum. And so for that second recommended practice, how we've done it, and again, this is just how we've done it, not necessarily how you need to do it, but we put it on a spectrum. Are we going to lead on this? Are we going to support this? Meaning, are we going to, if you're a member and you're working on something and it aligns, hey, this member is the expert on housing. Nonprofit employees need housing too. Here, we'll let them though lead, and we'll cheer them on. Or are we just going to monitor the situation and see where it goes? So that's how we've done that. And then we develop an agenda based on that. We will say, hey, here are the policy issues for the next legislative session that we anticipate taking some form of action on. And then, of course, it's really important to empower your staff in those policies to make decisions. Now, there are always going to be things that you want to bring to your board or your CEO. That we have that too. Like if there's a really big complex issue, that we will bring it to our public policy committee and our board. But the staff is empowered by self and Karen, our president CEO, who's also on the call. I think she's in transit today, but is on the call. But that we can take action on things as long as it meets this laid out policy, and that's important on another front because it provides clarity for your board and your staff on what's going to happen when you advocate. What does advocacy look like for your organization? Are we leading this? Okay, well, if we're leading this, then that means we're going to be in front of a camera potentially. If we're just monitoring this, then okay, they're just going to give us an update at the board meeting about it. We're not going to really have to budget time or money or resources or reputational or political capital to this. And then are you training your staff on these policies? Because it's not just sometimes if, together SC, we're blessed to have the ability to have a dedicated public policy person, but that is not true for most organizations. And so are you training your staff on these so that they understand when it's appropriate and able to speak up? And then Bob asked about it says if someone's not in a leadership position, who should and or how can someone encourage leadership to develop these kinds of policies to provide clarity? I think it's an important conversation, and I think I don't want to advise you on exactly how to bring it up with your specific if you're thinking of a specific organization in mind. But I think during staff meetings or board or strategic board conversations, I will say our guiding principles talk about governance and about how your board meetings should be at the strategic level, and that maybe there's an opportunity for your board to have this strategic conversation about what is advocacy, what is it if that's new for your organization, which is fair, or how are we going to do this work? That's where that starts to enter the fray. And I think for us, we've seen a lot of organizations, the light really turn on when we say, okay, well, what are you going to raise your voice on? Because there are a lot of good issues. If you're a housing group, are you going to raise your voice on minimum wage? I don't know. That'd be up to your organization to decide. If you are together SC, are you going to raise your voice on land use policies? That's not really in our mission, but we have a lot of members who do that work. So it's sometimes usually that's a no, unless it's about property taxes and nonprofit exemption, of course. So there's probably a case by case basis answer to that question, but overall, it's finding time and room for strategic conversations or unfortunately, at times it happens in a crisis when a policy comes knocking on your door that's going to negatively impact you. Sometimes that forces the door open as well. Core element number 4, our organization embraces nonpartisanship in its public policy work. This is super important. I've talked about this a little bit already, so I'll dig in a little bit, but I won't belabor all the points that I've mentioned already. But this is really important. And some of those recommended practices are our organization follows industry recommended practices and legal requirements when engaging with elected officials. I would hope that the legal requirements are easy, are obviously something to align ourselves with as a sector, but industry recommended practices is also important because we're all acting in line with these best practices. It provides a sense of expectation with elected officials that, hey, we're going to participate in this process, and here's how most of these nonprofits interact with us. But it also protects you of, hey, this is how our sector operates. This is our best practice. And that's important to us. Our organization makes every effort to ensure our communications and our programs around public policy are nonpartisan, both in fact and in perception, which can be sometimes challenging depending on the issue you have that maybe has become partisan. Our missions themselves are not partisan, but sometimes these issues become partisan, and it's not our faults that they have become that way. But it's really important from a legal aspect and from a political aspect to make sure that everything that we're pushing out are nonpartisan, in fact, and in perception. Because at the end of the day, this is about serving that person in front of you through the means that your mission dictates. And that's not partisan. That's just your mission. That's your care for your community and those that you serve. Does the organization deploy bipartisan strategies when taking action on a policy issue? When I ran a nonprofit that did political advocacy work across the state, I was their executive director for 6 years. We used to say that our issue is nonpartisan, but our strategies are bipartisan. And so, the issue is not, your issue may not be partisan, but to move the needle, you have to be bipartisan. There are political realities in our state house that dynamics that we have to deal with. And I mean that in good and bad ways at times. And so you've got to navigate those waters appropriately. And that means working with every brand of politician that we have, because these folks live in our community as well. Um, and then let's see. And our organization also works to engage elected officials, regardless of their political affiliation, in their mission. This is not is this is not a requirement again that you do this necessarily, and I don't recommend doing this necessarily during elections unless you're going to invite everybody. Don't get me wrong, but you have to invite everybody. But engaging elected officials in your work, whether it's a tour or it's a forum, which we talked about during day one, or it's simply sharing your newsletter with them, sending them your annual report, inviting them to speak at events. You can't give them free tickets just to give them free tickets, just a small state ethics flag. But if they speak in their official capacity, they can attend as guests. You can do that. You engage elected officials because it's much easier for them to think about you when they've seen your work, and you will be positioned as an expert in their minds.
Hey, GP, I have a
Yeah,
question for you.
please.
How do you stay nonpartisan when the issue you're advocating around has become politically charged?
hmm it's Again, I think you employ bipartisan strategies, which is easier said than, like, that's good words, GP. What does that mean? But so what I mean by that is, um, let's take uh, let's take a pretty easy let's take if one there's let's I'm coming up with an analogy, so I myself am not trying to appear partisan or anything. Let's say it's the sun and rain. Okay, like there's the sun party and the rain party, and one of them likes, and they both want the warm weather. And or I don't know. This is a terrible analogy, Heidi. I'm gonna scrap this one. How do you do it? It's not easy when your issue, and even more so your organization, because it's attached to that issue, is being highlighted as potentially partisan. Um, that's difficult, and it puts you in a weird spot. My advice to organizations that experience that is to focus on the issue and not necessarily about the political nature of the issue, but the issue itself is a policy issue. It's about the role of government. And I think we mentioned that in, I forget what, I think it was day one. It may have been day two, that a lot of these complex issues that become partisan are at their core about the role of government in that issue. And that is just that's a hardcore value to change. So our job is to add dimension to their view. And so that's the approach that I like to take, is let me add dimension to your view. If you believe government should historically or should always have this type of role in an issue, whether that's an increased role or a decreased role in this issue, let me add some dimension to your view so that you can see why your involvement, whether an increase or a decrease in it, what impact that has on this issue. And then is the result of that action, do you believe that result is positive or negative for those that we're serving? You're still not going to win everybody as well. And that's a little ethereal, of like, you can't please everybody. but also it's a math thing and in politics of how, you don't necessarily need to win everybody either. And it's okay to respect the differences between folks and devise other bipartisan strategies to achieve an outcome. I hope I word saladed that enough for everybody. Um,
That was really good. Thank you.
yeah, of course. And core element number five, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end here if folks have it. But core element number five, our organization budgets resources to engage in public policy and engages our full network to inform our work. Again, this is not necessarily recommending that you put a line item for $100,000 a year into advocacy work as a best practice, but understanding that when you take an action in advocacy, if you are wanting to do a little bit more, even the slightest action requires some form of capital. Now, that could just be as simple as, oh, we're going to have to send another round of newsletters, in our through MailChimp. Or it could be we're going to budget for a person to help do this. We're going to budget for a lobbyist to help us. We're going to budget for mailers or a state house rally. It could be a number of things. But at least that if you're going to participate in advocacy, that you're allowing that advocacy to occur, that it's not just on paper. And yes, we do advocacy, but there's no ability to actually do the work. And so that's really important to do. So some of these recommended practices, do we support efforts to train our staff in best practices and their knowledge of issue areas? We talked about in day one of where your mission and the policy intersect. You want to be the expert. One of the ways you can be an expert is to make sure your staff are experts in the fields that they operate in the fields of your mission. So are we empowering them to do that? That doesn't sometimes that has a cost, but sometimes it's a free webinar from Together SC with your membership. Self a shameless plug. It's joining a peer network and networking with peers so that they're learning about others who are tackling the same issue. It's attending our nonprofit issues forum in November. Shameless plug. That's hosted by our Advocacy Allies peer network. Does your nonprofit acknowledge that there are costs, including financial, social, reputational, political, and staff capacity with all advocacy related actions, and take each into account when making decisions? This is pretty much my major talking point on the core element altogether. Understanding that there is a cost. And if you're leading, you're going to spend more, not necessarily in money, but you're going to spend it across these various types of capital that you have access to. You're going to spend down some of it. If you're just monitoring something, that might be less. And if that's all you have the capacity to do, then like we've said, this is a journey of advocacy. That's fine. But acknowledging that we have to carve out some time and some resource for this work to occur. Do you budget for a level of public policy work that is proportionate and appropriate for our desired outcomes? And I think that's also, again, a check. Every organization is going to be different and have a different ability and capability. And I mean that in a good way of you're going to right size your advocacy work to what you can do. And then the organization engage our partners, constituent, and community advocates in developing and implementing our public policy work. You can gain more capital, reputational, political, social, sometimes financial with donor bases of by engaging folks in this work, that you're not just doing it to those that you serve, but you're doing it with them. And I think that gives folks ownership of those policy areas, whether that's in executing an advocacy strategy or in developing one, but engaging that network is important. So this core element is about sort of that internal mechanism of is our staff prepared? Is our network prepared to take action on this work, on these issues as they arise? I'm going to pause here. We have questions if there are other questions or conversations or specific situations folks would like me to highlight. This I'm happy to give back time to the day too, but I do want to pause for questions here and acknowledge that we do have this to download. You can scan the QR code. The URL is in there as well, and you can download our full guiding principles document. All 10 chapters are structured this way, and they all provide a workbook model. So you can start writing, you can write down where your organization is and where you need to go. I used our guiding principles when I was executive director at nearly all of my board meetings, where I would take a topic maybe and put it as the strategic conversation for the day. So really great tool to use in your organization. And I'll pause here. I know we'll send out resources, of course, and if you ever need them, feel free after the fact, feel free to email Heidi or myself, and we're happy to share. I'm happy to share the advocacy ones. Heidi's got, we all have access to our team, and we can get you anything you need.
For those
Um,
of you who were part of yesterday's session, I was traveling and didn't arrive home until after 10 p.m. last night, so I didn't get to send it out, but I will send it out today. The recap and all of the links for that as well.
If it's okay, I may call someone out. I'm Jordan. I'm gonna if you're on still, or if you're okay, I'm gonna call you out and maybe talk about your experience in this, just so that folks take it, don't take it at my word that that hopefully this resource is helpful and that you will tell the journey that your organization kind of went through.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you're inspiring me to use this way beyond the advocacy section, but I did um, take time earlier to go through it and use it as a workbook and set some goals and, like I feel like we're doing okay here. We have room for improvement here. I think it's really helpful, but I love hearing how you've used it in the past to sort of chip through all the other sections as well. On the advocacy stuff, yes, we have always believed in the power of advocacy. Our organization's been around for 20 years. It's always been considered sort of one of our legs of our three-legged stool and give it equal importance and weight in our work. Believe that it really counterbalances the need for like tactical support in our mission. If we can chip away at kind of the playing field in which these our constituents are operating. So it's really important. It's had varying degrees of attention in terms of like staff power. I inherited the role of advocacy a couple of years ago. Um, have been able, through Together SC's work, been able to fine tune and tweak things and really give structure to um, our priorities as an organization. Um, I inherited a good process for creating and getting board approval on an annual set of like short-term priorities that I've continued to operate with, but learned quickly that it was pretty rigid and not as useful as I think it was intended to be. So we worked to, since then, to create what I've shared in the chat earlier at the sort of longer term, bigger picture guiding principles. And again, that was a combination of staff and board working on that. Board had to approve it. They created a mechanism for how often they will revisit this document, update it as needed, but it's broad enough where if an issue arises in the middle of a year, that's not something we had on our plates with January 1, but fits into one of these buckets of us needing to take a leadership role or a supportive role. We can do that without having to go through any sort of board approval. If it's on this guiding principles document, we have a game plan and we can rock and roll as a staff. So it's been really helpful. And I agree with GP's sentiments of like, it's really easy as big-hearted nonprofit people to get distracted and want to help everywhere. So I think it's helping us stay focused and stay in our lane, but also to build coalitions. One of my um, focuses this year was to build a stronger coalition of sort of entrepreneurial resource partners who can not just um, check in on each other regularly, but also support and engage in the advocacy work that we're doing. These are organizations that have not historically done a lot in terms of advocacy, so bringing them into this sort of committee structure with me every other month to sit down and look at what we're seeing in policy opportunities and threats, how they can join in our coalition to take action or contact legislators um, is sort of the next step for us. So I don't know if that answered your question, GP, but that's kind of
Yeah,
where we
thank you,
are.
Jordan. That's great.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you. And I know Jordan's team had gone through this recently, so thank you for sharing. It's super helpful. And our policy agenda and framework, including our board policy for the most part, is on our website at Together SC in case anyone is ever interested in it. Again, you don't have to use the exact way we approach this work, but I think asking these questions in this chapter of guiding principles helps you think through the ways that best practices tend to show up, and you can curate your own approach for your organization and scale it the way you feel appropriate. And again, it's not a request that everybody has to put $100,000 in their budget every year, but do what you can. And we're here to help. But with that, if there are other questions, I'm happy to yield to them and dig in. And I just
I
have
have
to think,
another question.
oh, how do you go for it?
I think what happened yesterday in the General Assembly might be something, a great example of why advocacy is so important. I wondered if maybe you could comment on that. And for those who don't know, the General Assembly finally passed the state budget after a significant debate over earmarks and funding for nonprofit organizations. So, can you tell us what happened and what it means for South Carolina and nonprofits, and maybe how um, those that are participating what they should
Yeah.
do?
Um, we mentioned this a little bit yesterday, but it was still in process. But yes, we do have a budget now in the South Carolina, which is great. The Yesterday was an entire fight between the House and Senate about the House and the Senate. But earmarks were the fall guy on it all. So unfortunately for nonprofits who maybe had worked with a legislator to receive an earmark during this session, most of which were driven through agencies or through local governments this year, and all local governments are likely to not see their earmarks. The budget does not include earmarks this year, but that said, the budget itself includes new money for things like state employee raises. It includes some recurring and non-recurring funding that many nonprofits advocated for, whether at an agency or for a program they have a direct partnership with, or increased grants at various agencies that do go to nonprofits. So there were a number of positive wins for a lot of nonprofits. Nonprofits got thrown around. The name nonprofits got thrown around a lot more, though, around the earmark conversation, which ended up really being a fight between the House and the Senate about the House and the Senate, and not really about the nonprofits in the mix. It was a little chaotic, meaning there was a lot of feelings talked about on the House and Senate floor about each other. It was an interesting debate to watch, an interesting roadmap to how earmarks might be handled in the future between the two bodies, and that's something we're monitoring closely. And you'll likely hear more from us on that in the coming months. But it was it was an important journey for a lot of nonprofits to make sure that the state budget itself, or earmarks aside, that the state budget got passed, because there are a lot of things that nonprofits rely on, if anything, surety and clarity on what the state budget is. So they are gone. They may come back if depending on what the governor vetoes. They may return to dispense with those, but they also may, depending on the vetoes, let them be. They've done that before. And election day is coming up in November, so they're all a little busy with that as well. So we'll have more in our public policy update that'll be out Friday or maybe Monday, depending on how much typing I can get done and how much other news occurs between now and then. But we'll have more there. And again, that's one of those ways to plug in and start sharing resources with your staff and your team of what's going on in South Carolina that could impact nonprofits. So with that, I want to thank everybody for being a part of our advocacy bootcamp. This is the second year we've done it. Hope you got a lot out of it. We will do this again next August. We'll have similar content the first 2 days. The third day is always a little different. So if your team wants to join us when we offer it again next year, that would be great. If you want a refresher, of course, everyone's always welcome. The recordings are being sent out. Our resources will be available. And of course, I'm always just an email away if you have other questions.